Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Introvert Talks with me, Jo Rawbone. This is the podcast that celebrates the natural gifts of introverts so that we can flourish in all situations. Episode 217, Limiting Beliefs by Gaslight. Just last week, I emceed a LinkedIn Live event about recognising limiting beliefs with a brilliant panel of guests. So this topic is front of mind at the moment. Actually, I've discussed this topic on a number of occasions. Heck, I even offer a self-paced course called Flip Your Limiting Beliefs. And I offer that because I know that limiting beliefs play a huge part in how we progress or not towards living a fulfilled life. Last week I was also delivering a course on building authentic confidence, and limiting beliefs appears in that too. The one thing about limiting beliefs is that new ones can emerge at almost any time. So, as I've said on previous occasions, dealing with them is not a once and done affair. I often talk about them as almost playing whack-a-mole in terms of you get one knocked out and there's another one that appears. This topic also seemed to be such a natural follow-on from my episode about dream crushers that I wanted to continue the exploration, therefore no better time than the present. Now I'm going to be open with you here. I'm not entirely sure that gaslighting is quite the right term. But the concept I'm trying to explore is when someone force feeds you limiting beliefs, even if it is subtle, until you believe them. A better term might be imposed limiting beliefs, or insinuated or even inflicted limiting beliefs, but the effect is the same. We eventually believe things about the world and ourselves that are not a true reflection of our own beliefs. And if the other party is particularly clever, we may even lose touch completely with what we believe. Politicians are trained how to do this. Bad managers seem to have a natural gift for it. Toxic family members and partners thrive on it and see it as their right. So having said it's probably not quite the right term, let me start by defining gaslighting, which might then explain why I chose the term in the first place. Healthline defined gaslighting as a form of emotional abuse and manipulation. It occurs when an abuser or bully makes you question your beliefs and your perception of reality. Clue number 1. The effect sows self-doubt in your mind and encourages you to question your own judgment. Clue number 2. I'm still not sure it's exactly the right term, but we're close enough, I think. I'm left with a big question though. Is the act of gaslighting, as I'm referring to it here, intentional or not? Does the gaslighter know what they are doing? In traditional gaslighting, the answer is of course yes. But is that also true here? Following on from my previous episode, I do believe that some people may do this thinking that they are protecting us. And we have to remember that the underlying intention is manipulation. Some therefore do it because they can't help but try to control other people. It's almost a pathological need. This might be someone who has a cluster B personality disorder, sometimes known as the relationship destroyers, where manipulation is a way of life. I asked the panel members on last week's audio event where their limiting beliefs had come from, and there was definitely a theme of having been bullied starting during school years. I don't think, well, I hope anyway, that school-aged children know that they are seeding a potential lifetime of limiting beliefs. But I'm not naive enough to think that they don't realise that they are doing harm, intentional harm. And that's when our young people need our love and compassion once they are in our care. Because if in any way parents, primary caregivers, family or so-called friends are compounding the bullying, by at worst adding their own microaggressions, or at best not countering the bullying, then there is potential for substantial limiting beliefs being embedded. I also asked a few colleagues and friends to share how some of their limiting beliefs had come about. Many recognised a particular time in their life and/or a particular group or person to be at the centre of it. In drawing conclusions from their answers, here are some of the ways that I believe someone might gaslight you into having limiting beliefs. Firstly, imposing limiting beliefs might happen when people undermine your confidence by constantly criticising you or making you feel incompetent. They might belittle your achievements, your goals, your abilities, making you doubt your own potential and worth. The irony here is that this can be done by those who supposedly love us and by total strangers, keyboard warriors in some cases. The impact here may be self-limiting beliefs about what goals you set for yourself or aspirations you dream of. Next, it may also happen when people deny the validity of your emotions. Has anyone ever told you that you're overreacting, just being silly or being too sensitive when you show emotion or tell them that they hurt you? I know that has happened to me, and the impact for me was to instill a belief that my feelings didn't matter. I think this is why for years I described myself as a head on a stick and struggled to connect with or express my emotions. You might have heard me refer to myself previously as being emotionally illiterate. Not anymore. Something else that these people talked about that has happened to me was being isolated from a support network. In my case, the person in question used to badmouth people who openly believed in me and who encouraged me to be more, to stop playing small. The impact here was that, like the fleas that only jump as high as the jar lid previously in place, I played within the confines of the acceptable prison that they approved of. This certainly turned the volume up on my "who am I to" narrative. Sadly, this paves the way for many of us to behave in passive or submissive ways, making authentic assertiveness something that needs to be learned later in life. Next, I had a client share that she also got reminded of her age and that she should be taking things easier by now. I know I have a dear friend who sometimes asks me this too. The weird thing is that lately, when I've been feeling subpar, her words have rung loud in my head, and I've wondered if it's time to pack it in and settle into retirement. I realise that I've chosen to reject that limiting belief, and rejection is always within our power, of course. I recently saw a list of women in their 80s and 90s still doing remarkable things, so I realised that age need not stop me. Lastly, there's an insidious limiting belief that governments, the big news agencies and social media platforms foist upon us, and it is that the world is a dangerous place and that there's no hope. I've been in this world long enough to have seen that this has always been true. I grew up in the shadow of the Cold War, lived through multiple public health crises, numerous armed conflicts and human rights violations. I've also witnessed decades of terrorism and the ongoing sine wave of economic crises. I remember when my mortgage rate was above 15%. And all of these things might have thrown me into the pit of despair, asking myself, what's the point? Well, let me begin to summarise all of these by saying there is every point. And for me, all the while I am here on this earth with a mission to deliver, I'll keep doing my thing. And if you're still trying to figure out your thing or your next step, remember to book a synergy call with me so that your natural light doesn't get dimmed by the gaslighters. Rather than succumb to the prevalent hopeless narrative, I can choose to make my mark, leave my legacy in people, and do whatever I can. Being immobilized seems to be what the powers that be want, not this quietly gutsy introvert. If I only have this one life, I will live it as fully as I am able, walk gently on this earth, and leave footprints for others to follow that show a better way. So whether we call these gaslit limiting beliefs or something else, we need to spot them before we take them on wholesale and allow others to manipulate us. Be curious, inquisitive even, and explore the extent to which what you're hearing is really true. If you are in an environment where these things are prevalent, remember that microaggressions like these can be countered with micro-validations. These are subtle yet powerful interactions that act as affirmations, confirmations, or acknowledgements of a person's identity, emotions, or experiences. Be mindful that banter, whether in the workplace or in a family setting, is usually at someone's expense and is often perceived as a microaggression that lays the foundations on which limiting and self-limiting beliefs are built. Choose to drown out the microaggressions with micro-validations that enable empowering and liberating beliefs. Beliefs are simply views and opinions that you've chosen to accept as your truth. So choose yours well and don't allow others to make your choices for you. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, then please subscribe, rate us and leave a comment, because we know that helps other people find the podcast. And if other people find us, other introverts can flourish.
You are listening to an Intentional Media Production podcast.